Queen Chioma, ayy. Queen Chioma, Queen Chioma, Queen Chioma, ayy. She the one that always stay poppin', ayy. Flow crazy and it got my head bobbing, ayy. My nose up till you joints looking snotty, ayy. Brown skin cascade down my body, ayy.
Why do you think speaking your mind has become so controversial?
Because people no longer are using their minds, their brains.
So hey y'all, I'm back with another video. So tonight's video is yet again another Chioma Chats video podcast edition. And by the title, we're gonna be talking about Nicki Minaj, the Turning Point USA interview, and why so many people, including her own fan base, had such a strong reaction to what she said. Now, before we even get into this topic, I need to address something real quick because some of y'all have been in my comments doing entirely too much. I've been off YouTube for about like 8 weeks. I just came back. I'm clearly easing back into posting and catching up on stories in real time. Yes, I was already planning on talking about it. And no, you don't need to bombard my comment section acting as if I'm scared or avoiding a topic or picking and choosing who to hold accountable just because I didn't post it immediately. Like, please relax. The video was coming regardless. I don't rush commentary, especially when it involves politics, identity, religion, and global issues. I like to actually think before I speak, which is kind of the entire point of this channel. With that said, this is not a hate video. This is not even a hit piece. This is not even me telling Nicki Minaj what political party she's allowed to belong to. This is about credibility, alignment, and responsibility, because when you have a platform as large as Nicki Minaj's, your words don't exist in a vacuum, right? This situation didn't come out of nowhere. The backlash didn't come from random strangers. It came from people who have supported Nicki for years. And that's why I think this entire conversation is shocking.
So Nicki Minaj just showed up at a Trump event, said something so bad, the whole room went completely silent. And within 24 hours, she lost 10 million followers. So here's what happened. On December 21st, Nicki walked on stage at Turning Point USA's America Fest, hand in hand with the widow of Charlie Kirk, who was literally assassinated 3 months ago. And she went all in praising Trump, calling him handsome and dashing, telling boys to be boys, and calling Gavin Newsom Newsco. From there, everything collapsed. 10 million followers gone in one day. Ariana Grande hit that unfollow button. Critics are saying her career is completely over. And then she just deleted her entire Instagram. This is the same Nicki who in 2018 called herself an illegal immigrant and begged Trump to stop separating families. But now she's at a conservative rally saying it's okay to change your mind. Her fan base feels betrayed. The internet is at war. And before she vanished, she posted, "I will never stop being me."
So I've broken this video down into 5 main talking points, and we're really gonna get into it. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. So my first point is why the Barbz turning on Nicki was such a big deal.
Thank you very, very much. I would like to thank my beautiful Barbz.
I want to thank my incredible fans.
Barbz, I know you're out there. I love you so much. Barbz, I know you're somewhere out there watching this on TV. I love you so much. You are so passionate and so inspiring. Thank you so much for voting your little tiny fingers off. I could just eat you and kiss you and love you and hug you.
I just know that I'm so incredibly grateful and thankful for a couple little kids, maybe a few million. I call them my Barbz.
Personally feel like I have the best fans on this planet. You guys, I know you're out there on the internet somewhere, and I want to just say I love you.
For the queen, Nicki Minaj, yes.
Affectionately called Barbz, Nicki's fans came out in droves and didn't seem to mind that their brush with fame lasted only a few seconds.
Was too fast, but she's gorgeous.
Still starstruck. In a dream, like, I'm still in a dream. I thought I'd be freaking out, but I felt comfortable.
One of the most dishonest narratives I've seen online is people pretending that Nicki Minaj is being attacked by people who never liked her in the first place. And I'm sorry, that is simply not true. A large portion of criticism came from people who have defended Nicki Minaj through controversies that would have permanently damaged another artist's career. These are not casual listeners. These are fans who have shown up consistently, loudly, and loyally for years. The Barbz, right? They've attacked me. People have accused me of being a Barb, but I've also been attacked by the Barbz, right?
Hold on. You better lay low. Hold on. I got this. That's mine. That's mine. Hold on. The Barbz.
Nicki's fan base has always been extremely loyal, and a significant portion of that fan base identifies as gay, queer, or part of the LGBTQ+ community, particularly gay men. These fans didn't just stream her music casually, they built community around her entire artistry. They found confidence, they found expression, and freedom in the exaggerated, theatrical, camp energy that Nicki Minaj herself embodies. For many of them, Nicki wasn't just a rapper, she was a symbol of being unapologetically yourself in a world that constantly tells you to tone it down. So when Nicki Minaj chose to sit on a platform like Turning Point USA, a platform that has historically positioned itself against many LGBTQ+ protections, and then basically echoed rhetoric like boys should be boys, or it's okay for boys to be boys, and then talking about things dealing with trans people, it didn't land as like a simple policy disagreement. I think it felt personal for a lot of the Barbz, especially when that rhetoric comes from someone whose entire career was elevated by people who exist outside of traditional gender norms and expectations. And this is where I think a lot of people's frustration really sat in.
And for young men, don't be new scum. Yes, see, dear young men, you have amazing role models like our handsome, dashing president. For boys, be boys.
Amen.
Be boys, it's okay. Be boys. It's nothing wrong with being a boy. How about that?
Amen.
How powerful is that? How profound is that?
Amen.
Boys will be boys, and there's nothing wrong with that.
The conversation about trans policy and sports fairness in relation to Governor Newsom of California, that's one thing, you know, that's a nuanced discussion that people across political lines have. I feel like, honestly, there are some Democrats that agree, hey, we don't want our children being in sports with a trans child who transition, and I think Republicans feel the same way. I don't even think that one is necessarily even that political as people make it seem, but we ain't talking about that. But for her to align herself with a broader political movement that consistently promotes rhetoric that is hostile to LGBTQ+ existence is something else entirely. That's when people started asking whether their loyalty was ever truly even reciprocated, and I would have been on the same type of time.
Gosh, you have officially crossed the line. I am a long-time Barbz, so before any of the Barbz try to come at me and say that I'm a hater of Nicki, I don't like Nicki, I'm literally wearing the merch I got from going from her tour twice, also a signed CD up there. I'm very much so a proud Barbz. For the past year, it has been so hard to continue my support to Nicki Minaj because of the way she's supporting the current administration right now. I was a hardcore Barbz. I still am a hardcore Barbz. I love Nicki down. Her music has helped me so much throughout my teenage coming out era and just like everything. She's helped me so much through her music, and she has empowered me and makes me feel empowered. So to see her support this administration that goes against everything that I am is so disheartening. I've not wanted to do this with Nicki Minaj, but I have to separate the art from the artist, and it sucks. It sucks. It's of what she tweets and all the things that happened this past year. And when I go on to like check in and like maybe she said like, oh, this was all a joke, or maybe like this is all this and that, it just gets worse. And I feel like she's digging herself in a bigger hole every time situation this past year, and enough is enough. And I'm not saying that I'm not ever going to listen to a Nicki Minaj song ever again, because she's literally on my playlist. She's my top artist for the past like ever. Nicki Minaj religiously. If you know me in person, I'm always quoting Nicki. I cannot stand and condone everything she has done at this point, and I feel like it just got to a point where I'm just done. I'm wishing her the best. I really wish nothing but the best for Nicki Minaj, because I'm such a huge fan of her, but it's just so disheartening and I can't support it anymore. I've cut friends, I've cut family off that supported the current administration, and I don't think it's fair for me to not follow suit with her. And yeah, and it sucks to see that she's allowing them to use her and use the Barbz to kind of create this agenda around everything, and it sucks. It sucks. This is my message to my followers and the Barbz. It's time to make Nicki realize that she is not in the right, and it's time that we do something about it and not just condone her behavior.
And I think what makes it sting even more is that Nicki has always been vocal about her own mistreatment as a Black woman. She has spoken extensively about being disrespected, underestimated, and also boxed in. She's always quick to call out unfair treatment when it applies to her. So when she appears to dismiss or minimize the mistreatment of another marginalized group, whether she agrees or not, maybe she should have just kept her feelings to herself, and particularly one that has supported her so heavily, i.e. gay men, it feels like the empathy suddenly stops when it no longer serves her. And I also think this moment kind of forced a lot of fans to confront a bigger, uncomfortable dynamic. Some people love the aesthetic of gay men. They love the creativity, the femininity, the flair, the services, without fully respecting or standing up for gay people when it actually matters. They love the proximity, the inspiration, the energy, but not always the reality. For example, we see this dynamic play out in pop culture all the time. A very public example is when rapper Young Miami once said that if her son was gay, she would beat him. She would be mad, right? Which is a statement that is a very firm and conservative stance on sexuality. Yet at the same time, one of her closest friends is fellow rapper Saucy Santana, who is an openly gay, flamboyant, femme-presenting man. That contrast alone tells you a lot about how complicated and sometimes contradictory these relationships can be. And I see this pattern constantly, both online and real life. Like, I want all my gay male followers and viewers to really listen to this, because honestly, I see this all the time. There are a lot of gay men who naturally gravitate towards very feminine, stylish women, the girls who love hair, nails, fashion, beauty, and hyper femininity, because those spaces feel expressive and creative and familiar. And on the surface, those friendships can look genuine and affirming, but the reality is a lot of those women, not all of them, but some of those women do not actually accept gayness as a lived identity. They may enjoy your presence and your creativity and the way you elevate their image, but deep down, they would not want their son to be gay. They would not want their partner to be gay. And they do not truly agree with the lifestyle, even if they remain cordial, friendly, and respectful to you personally. And it's important to say this carefully. Disagreeing with someone's sexuality while still treating them with respect is one thing. People are entitled to their beliefs. But when someone has publicly stated that they are against homosexuality, not just uncomfortable with it, but actively opposed to it, that's no longer just like a quiet personal belief. That is a firm stance. And I want y'all to remember that. That's why moments like this hit so hard for Nicki Minaj's fan base, because many fans are now questioning whether their support and their proximity and the celebration that they gave her was ever met with the same level of care and protection in return. It probably wasn't, though. So when fans saw Nicki Minaj benefiting from that devotion for years, only to now align herself with rhetoric that doesn't protect them, it wasn't just disappointing. I feel like people thought it was just one-sided. And I think that's why fans didn't just criticize her. They stepped back and they said, hold on. She said, I am your leader. Yes, I am your leader. And they had to question, like, who is my leader? Because to be honest, I'm sure it feels like it was all conditional all along. Now, moving on to point number 2, the trans conversation and her MAGA alignment. Now, let's really unpack the trans conversation, because this is where I think nuance really does matter and where Nicki Minaj's framing caused the most damage for a lot of people. Nicki made comments about how it should be okay for boys to just be boys, and she specifically directed frustration toward California politics and Governor Gavin Newsom, who has publicly supported protections for trans youth, including their participation in school activities and sports. I want to be very clear here, because this is the only personal stance I'm going to state outright. I do agree that it is unfair for trans children to compete in sports divisions of the gender they've transitioned into. Biologically, it creates an uneven playing field, and the truth is, a lot of people agree with that. Democrats, Republicans, independents, that belief alone is not extreme or hateful. Nicki Minaj didn't just express conservative views, she openly aligned herself with MAGA rhetoric. And this is where the contradiction becomes kind of unavoidable for her, because there's a difference between being conservative and being MAGA, in my opinion. I truly think you can be a Republican and conservative, but maybe you're not MAGA, fully Trump supporter. Many Black people hold very conservative values and don't even realize it. Oh, I said it. Being conservative does not make you a bad person. Being Republican does not automatically mean extremist. But MAGA to me is kind of different. MAGA rhetoric has historically been hostile towards immigrants, towards Black women, overt sexuality, and nonconformity. All things that Nicki Minaj embodies. Nicki is a Black immigrant woman. She is sexually expressive. She's loud, theatrical, and unapologetic. Much of MAGA ideology directly contradicts who she is. So when Nicki aligns herself with MAGA specifically, people are left confused. Not because she can't have opinions, but because the rhetoric she supports does not even support her. Just saying. Now moving on to my next point, standing up for Nigerian Christians. I know she didn't really talk much about this in this specific interview, but she has been speaking about this as well. This section honestly genuinely frustrated me, especially as a Nigerian woman myself. Yes, I was born and raised in America, but my heritage is proudly Nigerian. Nicki Minaj framed violence in Nigeria primarily as Christians being slaughtered. While Christians have absolutely suffered violence, that framing is incomplete and misleading. Let's be real. Political warfare against religion has existed for centuries across continents and belief systems. The Holocaust itself is one of the most well-known examples of religion being weaponized in violent conflict. Nigeria's crisis is far more complex than a religious binary, if you will. It involves extremist groups like Boko Haram, long-standing regional instability, a lot of their corrupt government, colonial aftermath. Let's not forget Nigeria didn't gain independence until 1960, literally about 65 years ago. Also, land disputes and competition over natural resources. And that's the main thing, okay? So this violence didn't just suddenly begin, and it does not affect only Christians. Christians have been targeted. Muslims have been targeted. Entire villages have been destroyed. Women and children have suffered regardless of religion. To reduce all of that into a single narrative kind of strips the situation of its actual humanity. And here's something else that stood out to me. When you actually go to Nigeria, you don't see Americans for real, like other than maybe like people like myself who have the heritage that travel there for vacation. When you actually go to Nigeria, you see Asian and Chinese business interests heavily present. You see the shops, you see the factories, you see the operations, and they're clearly positioning themselves near natural resources. Nigeria is rich in oil and minerals that many global powers want access to. So for Nicki, someone who hasn't lived there and seems to be relying on surface level reporting, to present this as purely a religious issue, I mean, I just feel like it was uninformed. And it's especially strange coming from someone who herself is an immigrant. When you come from a country that doesn't have the global power of the United States, you should understand how easily narratives are manipulated just to justify control, intervention, and basically exploitation of said nation. This is bigger than religion, Nicki, okay? And speaking on it without understanding it fully is, to me, very irresponsible. Now moving on to my fourth point, role models and mixed messaging. Let's talk about the role model conversation, because this is where the optics like really fall apart.
Something that I've noticed recently is that for little girls, I think that no matter how you look, we should be trying to instill into them to be proud of how they look. Recently in the media, it's almost been like a push to, it's not just making young black children feel proud of themselves, but it's almost like doing that and at the same time telling other children not to be proud of themselves. And I don't want any child feeling that way.
Now, black culture is being held captive by influences, songs,
Which
and role models.
influences?
I mean, Nicki Minaj, Cardi B.
Okay, Nicki Minaj is causing dads to leave the home.
Hold on a second. I don't think that's a good role model for 18-year-old black girls. I don't think that songs that are talking about like glorifying wet female genitalia is exactly, I don't know which one wrote that song. Which one was it?
I think it was Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but
yes, Charlie Kirk had said similar things about other female rappers, but also said that Nicki Minaj is not a role model for young people, like people under 18. The truth is, what he said wasn't wrong. Nicki Minaj is not a good role model for children. Neither is Cardi B, neither is Megan Thee Stallion, neither is Lotto, and that's okay, that's the truth. Even Lil Kim once acknowledged that her music and imagery were not meant for young audiences.
How do you help little 12-year-olds like this understand that the music that they're listening to should not affect their lives? We're concerned about 12-year-olds singing about sex like this. Yeah. So what do you say, Lil'
Well,
Pam?
I definitely think that Chanel is too young, but mostly I think that she listens to it for the sound and for me being a young, positive, black young woman doing my thing, you know what I'm saying, and getting over a hump. And I want you to make sure you keep God in your life. And me as an older person to you, I want you to, be sure, I feel that you're too young to be having sex. You're too young to be listening to my music too. But if you're gonna listen to it, make sure you do the right thing. Don't go out and have sex for the wrong reasons. And if you do, And if you do decide one day that you want to have sex, use a condom, because I'm pretty sure you're old enough to get pregnant and catch a disease. I'm 18 or something.
Yeah, you talk to your mother and father about that too. Okay. Boy.
There is accountability in saying this is adult content for adults. And I believe that honesty does matter. Even if kids are going to consume it, as long as that performer knows, hey, I'm for the adult environment. So the question becomes, if Nicki understands that she is not a role model for young children, why now position herself in spaces that imply moral leadership? Why sit on a platform centered around values and Christianity, especially when her recent behavior does not reflect that transformation, right? Like Nicki's recent feud with Cardi B is a perfect example. Y'all know I had to bring it up. Regardless of who started it, Nicki hit below the belt. It was aggressive, it was personal and cruel. And Cardi B was foul too, and I had to call her out because she was saying things that I was like, what? But two wrongs don't make a Christian right, you know? That moment alone contradicted the image of this spiritual maturity that Nicki now wants people to accept. Faith isn't proven by tweets about prayer, okay? It's shown in restraint and humility and how you move when you're angry. And I even had to learn this, hence why I toned down my content over the years. And in that moment, Nicki really showed none of that during her beef with Cardi B, her recent one. Another comment that Nicki made during the interview that really stood out to a lot of people was when she said she doesn't have to put down blonde-haired, blue-eyed women just to uplift herself. But nobody should have to tear someone else down to feel confident in who they are. But the problem is that that statement completely ignores historical context.
If as Black women, we felt that we were not being represented and not being admired for our beauty, if we felt like that as Black women, why would we want to do that to other women? Why would we now need to make other people downplay their beauty so that we can feel, no, that's not how it works. I don't need someone with blonde hair and blue eyes to downplay their beauty because I know my beauty. Do you understand? It doesn't bother me that a woman feels and says that she's beautiful. Why shouldn't she feel that? Why have we gotten to a point where certain colors or certain kinds of people have to be afraid of loving themselves and loving the way they look?
Black women did not create the beauty hierarchy that places white women, especially blonde, blue-eyed women, at the top. That hierarchy was created long before Nicki Minaj ever entered the industry. And Black women have been forced to navigate it, survive within it, even fight against it just to be seen as worthy. And Nicki Minaj knows this. So when Nicki says she doesn't need to put down blonde-haired, blue-eyed women, it feels like she's positioning herself above the conversation, as if acknowledging the hierarchy is the same thing as participating in it. And those two things are just not the same. You don't have to insult white women to be aware of the reality that Black women are still at the bottom of the social and beauty hierarchy. To them, at least, not to me. I think we're at the top. Pretending that hierarchy doesn't exist doesn't make you evolved. It makes you kind of disconnected. I'm gonna be real. What makes this especially frustrating is that Nicki Minaj has built so much of her career on speaking about what it means to be a Black woman in spaces that were not designed for her. I'm the only female this, first female rapper this, female, female, female. She's been saying this for a decade plus. She has spoken about being overlooked, disrespected, and held to different standards. So for her to suddenly adopt this, I don't see it, I rise above it, rhetoric feels very inconsistent with her own lived experience that have also been documented on the internet. Also, let's not forget this part of the conversation. Nicki Minaj repeatedly said that she wants young girls to feel confident, empowered, and secure in who they are. But when you look at her recent behavior, especially on social media, that message completely falls apart. Her Twitter rant directed toward Cardi B's daughter tells a very different story. You cannot publicly mock a child's appearance, making comments about her gums, her teeth, and her looks, and then a few months later get on a platform talking about how much you care about young girls' confidence. Girl, what? Like, huh? And yes, before anyone says it, Cardi B spoke on Nicki's child as well. That is true, but that's exactly the point. This is why you choose your battles. As adults, especially as parents, there are certain lines you simply do not cross. Children should never be collateral damage in grown people's conflicts. So when you claim you care about children, especially young girls, your behavior has to reflect that even when you're angry, especially when you're angry, actually. And in that moment, Nicki did not show restraint or maturity or consideration for the long-term impact of her words. That's why it's hard to take her current messaging kind of seriously. Like, it's kind of mixed. Not because she can't grow or change, but because very recently she did not demonstrate the values she now wants to lecture other people about. Confidence in young girls is not just a talking point you pull out when it's convenient. It's something you protect consistently. And that inconsistency is honestly a contradiction on her end. So to me, all of this kind of language reads as like respectability politics. It sounds like an attempt to appear palatable to people who already benefit from that hierarchy, rather than standing firmly in the reality that Black women have always had to work harder to be seen as equally beautiful. And that's why this comment rubs so many people the wrong way. Not because it was offensive on its own, but because of who it was said to, where it was said, and what it seemed to be trying to signal. Now, moving on to my fifth and final point, performativity, motive, and why people are questioning this. Because Nicki, Lord, girl, I have supported you, girl. But I had to question this. Nicki Minaj has never publicly presented herself as a deeply devout Christian throughout her career. And that alone is not an issue. People grow, people evolve, people find their faith later in life, especially as they get older, start families, and move into different phases of their careers. That kind of change can be real, and it shouldn't automatically be dismissed. However, real growth usually comes with reflection and accountability, and also consistency. What Nicki presented in this interview didn't feel like that, if you ask me. It felt kind of like abrupt, like, oh, yep, this is what I'm doing. It was kind of underdeveloped. It felt like a pivot without doing the actual groundwork. And this is why so many people are questioning her motives. Not because, she can't grow, but because the shift appears disconnected from her documented beliefs, her past statements, and public behavior over the years. And again, most recently, Nicki has been very vocal throughout her career about what she likes, what she doesn't like, and where she stands on social and political issues. So when she suddenly aligns herself with rhetoric and platforms that historically contradict these positions, it kind of is just going to naturally raise eyebrows. This conversation was further amplified after Joy Reid discussed the situation on the Angela Yee podcast. Joy Reid shared her opinion that Nicki's alignment just may be self-serving. And I think a lot of people think this. It may be potentially connected to hopes of political favor, including pardons related to her brother, who is serving 25 years to life for crimes involving a minor, and to her husband, who has his own criminal history involving sexual violence.
What did you think about Nicki Minaj?
Listen, speaking of undocumented people, this lady came here, and by the way, we share a birthday, so it's a little weird that we always we did beef before. So I was a fan of her music. I think she's a musical talent. I mean, just like Kanye West, these are talented musicians. Nobody should never listen to anything she says other than just her music. This lady came here at 5 years old, undocumented. She understands what it's like to be undocumented. Grew up in this city. She's deportable, because she definitely was undocumented originally. She is a Trinidadian. She didn't say anything about the killing of those Trinidadian fishermen. I'm quite sure the people in Trini noticed that she doesn't seem to care about her people. And the idea of sucking up to Trump, not long after you said you don't want a Melania because you don't want a weak woman, right? You don't want somebody that's just sucking up to the president. And after you criticized his deportation policies yourself, and now all of a sudden you're kissing his ass.
What do you think happened?
I think she has a brother and a husband who've got some serious legal issues around pedophilia, particularly her brother, who's serving 25 to life or something for the violation of a child or of children. And I think she's thinking, how I could get a pardon? I'll go be friends with the Turning Points USA people. I'll kiss Trump's ass and Vance's ass, and maybe I'll get pardons, and maybe I won't get deported. I mean, my cynical self says that she's trying to protect herself, her brother, and her husband from the administration by kissing their ass.
To be clear, this is Joy Reid's analysis. It's not like a confirmed thing, and there's no public evidence proving that this is the reason behind Nicki's actions, but the fact that this theory is even being taken seriously speaks volumes. People are not pulling these questions out of thin air. They're asking them because the pivot feels very strategic. It doesn't feel like organic. It doesn't feel like someone is speaking deeply from the belief that they have. It feels more like someone is just trying to align themselves with power, even when that power has historically been hostile to who they are and who their audience is. And yes, it's also important to acknowledge that people genuinely do change. Some people switch their political parties over time. Some people reassess their beliefs as their lives change. That does happen. But when change is real, it usually comes with transparency, self-awareness, and acknowledgement of your past contradictions. I mean, she's not speaking about the things that she said in the past. I think that's the part that's missing. I think what makes this all stand out even more is Nicki's relative absence in recent years. She hasn't been consistently releasing music. She hasn't been highlighted highly visible in interviews or cultural moments. So when she reemerges publicly and is through this specific platform discussing these specific talking points, it definitely is going to invite a lot of scrutiny. Not hatred, but scrutiny. This didn't feel like, you know, her natural evolution. I feel like it was kind of calculated. Nicki Minaj's musical legacy is secure. That's not up for debate. She is one of the most influential female rappers of all time. But legacy is not just about your talent, it's about your trust, and trust is very fragile. Many of Nicki's fans grew up with her. They're older now. They're more grounded. They don't idolize celebrities the way they used to. So when someone they admired speaks loosely about real world issues that affect real people, the reaction is really not outrage. I think it's just distance. Nicki Minaj didn't have to speak about these topics, but once she chose to, she owed her audience depth and historical context and also consistency about what she really believes in. And I believe that is why this moment doesn't just feel like she's being canceled. I feel like overall everything that's happening to her really does feel like a consequence. So that is it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Please let me know your commentary on my commentary down below. What do you think? What do you know? Let me know. If y'all haven't already, make sure you're following me on all of my social media networks. If you guys love this video, please comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. I love y'all, and I will see y'all in my next one. Bye, y'all.
Queen Chioma, Queen Chioma, ayy. Queen Chioma, Queen Chioma, Queen Chioma, ayy. She the one that always stay poppin', ayy.